Welcome back to the Fitness League, helping busy humans build strong bodies, sharper minds, and better lives. Join us each week as we cut through the noise, challenge the norms, and empower you to train smarter and live stronger. Today's episode is one I'm especially excited about because we are tackling a topic that affects every single person, whether you are 18 or 80, and that is how exercise impacts our bodies across the many chapters of life. We're going to walk through what changes in the body from young adulthood to pregnancy and postpartum to menopause, and then, of course, into our later decades. And more importantly, how movement can support us through each of those transitions. Spoiler alert, strength training is your best friend, but we're going to bust some common myths, explore the science, and give you practical takeaways for how to adapt your training as your body evolves. So let's get into it.
How you guys like that intro?
Woo! That might have been my first intro ever.
It was not your first ever. You've had a couple.
Maybe it was my second. I feel like I did one Q&A once.
It's possible.
I think
it's
that was
that
it.
One Q&A.
Let us know.
So just
you liked
so you guys know, we listen, we read the reviews. This is something we were thinking about. Like, how do we actually X'd our last one? It was too drawn out and not specific enough.
Yeah.
Someone else left a review saying they'd love us to kick off the podcast episode, especially for new users, with that little summary of what we are, who we are, what we do. And I love it. So we're there, we're reading, we're adapting everything you guys say, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Only put the ugly in private DMs.
Yeah.
The good stuff put in the reviews.
The ugly is not a public review, please and thank you.
But I forget who left the review, but we appreciate it. That was the final nudge to get this up there.
Yeah, so to do a little intro, not just for the episode, but like an intro to the show for anyone who's new to the show. Like, hey, what is this? What is this about? So hopefully that gives you a good little overview. All right, cool. Let's talk about exercise. It's good for you. Do it. End of episode. Okay.
See you later.
That's it. Bye. I was recently speaking about this topic at a conference, and I think it's a helpful conversation. It feels especially relevant. Many of us have parents, grandparents, maybe even great grandparents, who are in their later decades. And I think at this age, we talk a lot about, and probably what's super relevant to like Alessandra and I is, training around pregnancy, training around postpartum, and we get a lot of those questions. And training around a specific chapter of life. But what about after that? Like, what about menopause, which is kind of a hot topic? And what about in your 60s, 70s, 80s? Like, should we still be training? So I think this is a helpful topic to chat through, because you're going to notice here as we go through this that there are definitely some common themes that we're going to be talking about promoting exercise pretty much through every chapter of life. But what ends up changing is like what that exercise is doing for your body. So yes, we might want to see you strength training no matter what age you are, but why strength training is so important during that phase might change. So best way to kind of start this out is to start with young adulthood, teens to late 20s. And I think we get a lot of questions about like, is it okay for my teenager to exercise? Yeah, great. Start those habits now. Absolutely. So when we're talking about exercising in young adulthood, one of the main things or really main benefits is going to be that we have this kind of peak bone mass development. So we tend to reach kind of peak bone mass in our late 20s, and resistance training and weight bearing activities can help to maximize that bone density and reduce the future risk of osteoporosis. We're also obviously building the habit. Josh, Alessandra, and I talk a ton about building habits in your earlier years, or habits that we pass down to our kids so that they have those habits ingrained as adults. So you're talking about habit building at a young age. Honestly, building the foundations of strength and muscle too. So strength training in youth can lead to better neuromuscular adaptations as they age, longer term strength retention as someone ages. And we actually have that early exposure of lifting that's going to reduce our risk of a ton of different diseases and sarcopenia later in life. So it's very cool to see the benefits of exercise from a young age that are not just going to benefit you in that moment, but are going to benefit you in the long term as you do age.
So I know we jumped right into
other
young adulthood.
kind of benefits.
What is there Is there a youngest age to start? Because this has been a bit of a hot topic in regards to what is too early. And then there's been, I would say, some of the more recent stuff coming out is, well, it's not going to affect growth plates and all the things we used to worry about before. So is there a minimum recommended age to even begin introducing it? I'm talking like with Kai, he'll come out with us and grab some kettlebells, we'll practice some form squats and some bench press, or, just not going through a full workout, but going through some certain movement patterns with weight, and just let him have fun with it as he wants to do it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. I think there's a psychological component of like, you don't want to force your kid into exercise, but like, he has seen mom and dad exercising in the gym, in the garage since he's born. So like, that is something that's ingrained in his lifestyle. It used to be believed like, oh, don't let kids lift weights early. It'll like stunt their growth. And that has been disproven over and over and over again. I don't believe that there is one specific start age. But as far as I know, as long as it is done safely and supervised and is age appropriate, you're really never too young to lift weights. There's even some science from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and from NSCA, which is National Strength and Conditioning Association, that both support supervised resistance training in children and adolescents. And there's also some research on like injury risk showing that even if they are young, there is no greater risk of injury as long as like they're doing it safely, they're supervised. I will repeat again that it does not stunt growth. That myth has been widely debunked. And also growth plate injuries are very, very rare and are typically a result of like poor form or excessive load and people not doing their strength training in an age appropriate way. So, given the fact that Kai has really great mentors in his corner and parents who can advise him well, I would not be worried at all about like Kai picking up a kettlebell. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
For those who are curious.
Yeah. I think it's a little different for kids. Like obviously with Kai, you'd want to focus on form over weight. You're not trying to get Kai to hit a PR. It's more like, hey, let's master this movement pattern. Let's do a body weight squat. And then maybe you could hold a 5-pound kettlebell the next time you do a body weight squat. So I think for kids, supervision is key. Making sure we're not trying to like max lift at 5-6 years old, and just really focusing on mastering the movement patterns and the neuromuscular patterns before you're loading. So
absolutely. I also think tying in younger age, but also going back into that young adult demographic, it's going to have, especially nowadays, but when it comes to self-esteem and mood and confidence, managing stress, managing anxiety, things that so many of this younger generation, they're all struggling with. And we're seeing a huge correlation between like what their weight is. Most of these guys are significantly overweight and they're inactive and they're playing video games and they're not eating the right things. They're not prioritizing, enough nutrient dense options throughout the day. Obviously, all these things have a cumulative effect when everything is kind of pushed in one direction versus the other. But it's such a beneficial outlet, especially if they can learn to do it in a modality that they enjoy. Maybe they love running, maybe they love training for basketball, maybe they love lifting. It's just, they're going to be a power lifter. They enjoy that kind of lift heavy weights and see the weight move and see the progression over time, whatever that is. It's just such a mental foundation. Forget the physical aspect of it for a second.
Yep.
Being able to give them something to build on and provide a source of confidence. I've achieved this feat. I've moved myself forward. I've seen progression. It's a simple tool that doesn't even require a full gym or any weights. You can do it in so many different aspects when it comes to training that parents have in the tool belt that we're not really utilizing at the moment. Hey guys, real quick. If you've been listening and thinking, I need to start doing something for my health, but I don't have time for a full program, that is literally why we built the SDE Method app. It's a fitness app made for real people with real lives. Busy parents, working professionals, anyone juggling 100 things. You can get a smart, effective workout in around 30 minutes, some even closer to 20 minutes, and log out knowing you made progress. You can finally take the guessing out of your workouts. We have workouts designed to be done at the gym or at home, and you get access to all of them when you sign up. As life phases change, you can pick a new one that aligns better with what you have going on right now. And one more thing, we are also qualified for HSA FSA reimbursement. So just hit the app link in the show notes, start where you are, we'll help with the rest. All right, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I think there's a big psychological resilience piece of it. And we've obviously seen that, with adults and clients about, improving their mental health, their anxiety, their depression. And there is some research on that in young kids and adolescents that physical activity is linked to lower rates of anxiety and depression. You, me, and Alessandra, I feel like get a lot of questions about like mental toughness and building resilience. And I have to say, like, a good bit of that comes from exercise and forcing yourself to do something you don't always want to do, or showing up even when you don't feel like it, or doing it tired. And when we could teach that to our kids at a young age, they can build that resilience too. So I think that's helpful. So yeah, in young adulthood, strength training, we want to aim for 2 to 3 times per week. We want to be focusing on progressive overload, making sure that we are emphasizing compound lifts. I'm talking about young adulthood here, not, little kids, but compound lifts. That's going to be your squats, your deadlifts, your presses. This is going to help to maximize bone and muscle health. Another key focus area is obviously going to be cardiovascular health. So including moderate to high intensity exercise for heart health, for metabolic benefits, and overall fitness. Another thing this is just like kind of a random thing, but I always like to bring this up when it comes to young adulthood, especially in women. We tend to have better injury prevention when we have stronger bodies and stronger foundations. So, I'm not sure if you've heard this before, Josh, about ACL injuries being super common in young females. There's also some really interesting research around the menstrual cycle and ACL injuries, that there's a different level of like tendon laxity depending on where you are in your menstrual cycle. And so like the majority of ACL injuries happen like at a very specific part of the menstrual cycle, which is like totally topic for another time. But I like to bring this up in like young female lifters or young female athletes, that ACL injuries are more common due to the Q angle of like the quad and the hip. So being able to strengthen your hamstrings, strengthen your glutes, strengthen your core, like that's crucial for preventing those types of injuries later down the line. So yeah, that's, I would say, a decent wrap up for young adulthood. I feel like after young adulthood, I don't want to make this episode all about women and exercise, but I feel like we do have to talk about pre and postnatal health. There's still a lot of myth busting that could be done around there, either pre and postnatal, but also, perimenopause and menopause. So, you have heard me and Alessandra say this a million times over, but I will just reiterate, when it comes to pre and postnatal health, exercise reduces risk. It does not increase risk. When we exercise during pregnancy, when we exercise during postpartum, we are not harming ourselves. We are not harming the baby, assuming we are gradually scaling correctly, and adapting with what's happening. But we see decreased risk of gestational diabetes, decreased risk of preeclampsia, decreased risk of excessive weight gain, decreased risk of low birth weight, decreased risk of preterm labor. We're also going to see that strength training enhances our core and our pelvic floor control. Typically, people who exercise have shorter labor times, decreased risks of C-sections. It doesn't always work out that way. So if you're like, I had the longest labor ever, or I had a C-section, so none of this is true, it doesn't mean it automatically applies. It just means lesser risk. And then postpartum recovery. Women who exercise before and during pregnancy tend to recover faster postpartum and tend to maintain higher energy levels. Alessandra's a great example of that we're kind of seeing right now. Like, she's doing pull-ups, she's putting up big numbers on her lifts already, 3 months postpartum in her squats, her bench, her deadlifts, because she carried exercise throughout that pregnancy. She
just started a daily undulating periodization. So she's all in at this point.
She's ready to start powerlifting again. We got to get a meet on the schedule for her. The ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, states themselves that resistance training is not only safe, but beneficial. Another thing that I also want to mention with that is that it used to be believed that whatever you were doing previously, you could continue doing pregnant. But that if you weren't exercising pre-pregnancy, pregnancy is not the time to start. That has since been recanted and disproven that even if you've never exercised a day in your life, assuming you can scale that gradually, you can absolutely start exercising for the first time ever during pregnancy, because it is that beneficial for mom and baby. So I think that's really helpful to keep in mind. Key focus areas for pregnancy: squats, deadlifts, glute bridges. We want to support pelvic alignment. We want to support posture. We want to definitely focus on diaphragmatic breathing, TVA engagement to support that core function. Shameless plug, shameless, not so shameless plug. If you pop into our SDE Method app, we have prenatal programs in there, and Alessandra built that out with, is it prenatal that's built out with Dr. Jen, or postpartum? Now I'm misremembering.
I know it started prenatal. I believe it's the full program though, pre and post.
Pre and post. Okay. So Alessandra and Dr. Jen Morgan, she's a pelvic floor PT, built out this program together, so that all of the core work is in there, all of the diaphragmatic breathing is in there, all of the return to exercise in there, as well as the, prenatal programming for exercise support during your pregnancy. So if you are looking for something like that, we do have it. And then same for postpartum exercise. Making sure that we are including functional movements that are going to restore pelvic control. We know how to engage the core properly. And obviously we want this gradual return to strength training. And if you need a coach for that, I know a few. Josh, anything else you want to add there?
No.
As a pregnant postpartum woman?
No, I can't give you guys too many experience details.
How about menopause? How about perimenopause and menopause?
Not quite there.
So this one I do want to hit on because, we can kind of say like, hey, 40s and 50s. And for the women, yes, this is going to be perimenopause and menopause, but I feel like also for men, don't they call it like menopause? Is that a thing? Did I make that up?
It's
I've heard
like
people
your
say
midlife
that.
crisis.
Like when your testosterone
in the middle of that.
What?
It's kind of like the beginning of your midlife crisis that all kind of transitions into this downhill cycle.
Well, yeah, like you're not having the same hormonal changes that we might see in more extremes with menopause, but I think there is an age where like testosterone typically starts to decrease. Do you know what that age is?
So they have two main checkpoints. I think the first is like 34 and the second is like 61. And that's when you see
That's a
these
big gap.
So that's the biggest plummets in those two age periods, that kind of general time frame. I will say though, like, oh, it's this age. This is just part of the norm. This is just how it happens. Think about what's going on at those ages. Like 31, you start having kids, you start working long hours, you're not sleeping. We see testosterone plummet. Age 61, something starts getting creaky in our back and the knees might be a little achy because we've been so busy for the past 27 years. And we become even more inactive. We just say, oh, we hit our 60s, things slow down naturally. We see another plummet. But we also see these people, I think it was actually Dr. Gabrielle Lyon was talking about her dad. And he's a skinny dude. She said, doesn't lift weights, but maybe he's in his 70s or so, and his testosterone is still at 800. So that's just based on lifestyle. If we're doing certain things, we're taking care of ourselves, we're recovering well. These don't all have to go out the window when we start having kids and we start working busy jobs and have additional responsibilities in life. It's not just the fact that we're aging that's leading to these things to happen. It's us accepting the norm in a sense that this is just part of the deal. This is the way it goes. And letting the things that we prioritized for so long just kind of hit the back burner. We're not training nearly as often. We're not sleeping nearly as much. We're not managing stress. And it's just exponentially more difficult versus accepting that it is going to be more difficult and figuring out ways around that or to manage certain baseline levels. And before we kind of jump through this whole life cycle in regards to strength, I do want to hit on a couple of touch points, even like for our age group and demographic and going throughout. Your reason for strength training is likely going to change. So later teens, early adulthood, training into college, you are likely training to attract your longtime spouse. Like you are there for the men and women that you are trying to attract.
Aesthetics.
Exactly. You're training for aesthetics. Some of you might be involved in sports, but primarily you just want to look your best. You want to feel your best, and you're out there, looking for whoever you're trying to date. that once we lose that, I feel like a lot of people, well, they get married, they gain the weight, they hit the jobs really hard, and we're working and stressed, blah, blah, blah. That's part of it. It's like I no longer have to attract the mate. So like I'm not worried about that part anymore. I don't need to go to the gym 6 days a week.
The old settle in marriage.
Settle in marriage. First of all should still be trying to impress our significant other through all phases of life. So that's number
Yeah.
one. But the second piece of that is like how much better will you perform in work with your kids?
Mm.
What like just enjoying life in general if we continue to prioritize those things. So we're allowed to change the modality, we're allowed to change what we're doing, we're allowed to change how we're doing it, we're allowed to change why we're doing it. But you should still be doing it. Coming out of this last phase, the last year or so, I've been training 3 to 4 days a week, literally 20 to 30 minutes a session, because we've just been in an absolute grind. And we've had the kids, we've had the businesses, the different things launching, and it's just been how I've shifted it. And that's how I did so it didn't just disappear. And like, okay, I'm not doing this, I can't worry about that. Like my mental health would be out the window if I wasn't continuing to lift and to take care of myself in some capacity. Now, recently, the past couple months, I've had the itch to add some more back, and it is taking more time, but it's more of a priority again. I want to get back to that next level because I feel like if I don't do it now, then I'm never going to get back to that. So I am training 5 days a week again, and it is about an hour per session that I'm lifting, and it feels good. It does take some sacrifice, and I did have to shift my why for that. But it's okay to change. We talk about the 5 pillars all the time, the L5 method: training, nutrition, mindset, movement, and habits. They're going to ebb and flow, and they're going to look differently through all phases of life. But you should always have some protocol incorporated for each of those. So on top of, the what is the best for each life cycle that we go throughout in regards to this specific episode, it's also what is the best in regards to how we apply it, the amount of time we can apply to it, the resources we have to go towards that. But it should never just go away. It's kind of, and you even alluded to this at the top of the episode. It's like,
Yep.
spoiler alert, strength training is involved in all of these.
Yeah.
So,
Spoiler alert. Every phase that we talk about, we're going to talk about strength training and cardio, but your why becomes so much different. And to your point, I think, yeah, like young adulthood, or most people who, I would even venture to say that most people who start their health and fitness journey, it's for an aesthetic reason. And with time, I think for a lot of people that ends up shifting into like health, performance, where you're like, oh, wow, the sole purpose of exercise isn't just caloric burn. There are a lot of other benefits of exercise. So I think it doesn't always start that way. Granted, there are, of course, some people who are like, oh, my doctor says I need to start exercising, and they are exercising for health because maybe they don't want to become diabetic, or they want to lower their insulin needs if they are type 2 diabetic. But yeah, I think it transforms, your why transforms, and your training transforms through to that.
and I'll throw this out. I know we're going to transition into older adulthood. But for those who are like, well, it's too late to start I want to change my body, I want to build muscle, I want to do these things. You can literally, they did studies on, I think it was 70 or 78 was the age
80
group,
and 90-year-olds. They did studies on
gaining
people,
muscle.
yeah, 80 in their 80s and 90s gaining muscle. Yep.
So it's never
It is
too late.
never too late. I think I maybe talked about my grandfather on one of these recent episodes. But I'll bring it up again just in case. He is 84, and he was recently hospitalized for something, and long story short, he fell, and internally there were some issues from his fall, and he was in the hospital for a few days and couldn't eat for a few days because there was some intestinal issues, couldn't eat for a few days, couldn't get out of bed for a few days. And then when he was finally released from the hospital, well, he's an 84-year-old man that just spent a week in the hospital, who doesn't have a ton of muscle mass to begin with, who hasn't eaten in a week. And he's like, I can't get out of bed. I can't stand up. I can't walk. And he ended up needing to go to a rehab facility for a few weeks where they were going to do PT with him twice a day because he lost so much muscle from being in the hospital and just not moving for a week. And because there was no baseline, like there was not really much foundation of muscle, there was nothing to rely on. So I love thinking of muscle as this like insurance policy. It doesn't mean something won't go wrong. It just means you're going to be better equipped if something does go wrong, or to recover from something. And so I remember visiting him in the rehab facility, and he was so discouraged because he was feeling so weak. And he was like, Joelle, I'm 84. Like, is this the end of me? Like, he has a German Shepherd who he walks every day, and like completely with it, 84-year-old, takes walks every day, walks with his dogs every day, but like hasn't done strength training in a long time, or really ever in his life. And he was feeling really discouraged because he's like, how am I going to walk my dog? How am I going to unload the dishwasher? How am I going to like put things away, do laundry, like do basic activities that I've always done when I can't even stand up out of a chair? And I'm like, we got to get you moving. You got to start exercising. He's like, how am I going to exercise if I can't even stand up? I'm like, we're going to start with you sitting right here in this chair doing literal leg extensions, like knee extensions with no weight. And then we're going to practice sitting up out of a chair, sitting and standing out of a chair using the handles. And then we're going to start talking about you not using the handles and standing up out of a chair without pushing off of the armrests. And slowly he has rebuilt up that strength, and he's walking his dog again, and he's getting those activities of daily living back. But there was a point where he turned to me and he was like, I feel like I'm doomed. Like, I'm too old to gain muscle, aren't I? And I was like, absolutely not. You are absolutely not too old to gain muscle, to gain strength. There has been so much research on this. And here he is, like a few weeks later, and he's back to walking and moving because he was able to gain that strength back. But he was really discouraged at first. And he was like, I'm not getting stronger. I'm not getting stronger. I'm like, did you even get out of your chair today? Did you take a walk today? Well, no. I'm like, the strength coming back is not going to happen by accident. Like, you are going to have to work for it. Whether you're 20 or 80, there's only one way to build strength, and it's to provide stimulus to that muscle. Your stimulus is going to look a lot different at 84, but we still need that same stimulus. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it is never, ever too late. And you don't want to be in that position. Like, the goal is to prevent yourself from getting to the point where if you are in the hospital for a few days, that you have the foundation and the muscle built already, so that if you do lose a little, like, there's still some there, if that makes sense, versus there's not much there. Now you lose even more because you've been starved and in a hospital bed for a week, and like, now you got nothing. You're starting from scratch.
And it really is the least sexy proposition to be like, all right, we're training now so that when we're 85 years old, we can go to the store by ourselves, and we can carry groceries in from the car. But that is part of it. And one of the cool things right now, like, we don't have to look that far down the road, but we have so much data available to us. You look at Aura Ring, it'll give you the cardio estimated age. You look at Whoop, it'll give you your estimated biological age based on certain factors. There's a bunch of different technologies that'll kind of estimate these things for you. And if we can just stay ahead of where we are, and for a lot of people, it's just going to be getting back to baseline. Like, if you're 30, your biological age might be 45 or 50, which should be a wake-up call. But if we can get back to on track and then bring that backwards, there are so many things coming out when you talk about longevity and different things we can be doing and different protocols and technologies, and not necessarily supplements, but kind of the, what would you call, not HRT and not like hormone optimization therapy, but different things that they're coming out with to actually live longer. Like, some are supplements,
practices.
but we'll call them practices, where it's not, if we take care of ourselves, it's not uncommon to live to 100 at a minimum. Some people are going to go well above and beyond that. It's going to be, we'll start seeing people who age to 150 in our generation. Like, that's not going to be something we overlook. That is,
we talked about that in our longevity episode.
So you might feel old, and you might have, or your peers may have 100 years left to live if you're 50 years old right now. It's not old.
That's wild.
We're resetting the clocks, and you can be 20 years younger biologically if we start taking care of ourselves now. So it's not sexy, but there is some tech that does make it a little more sexy, which is cool.
Yeah. I think something that was really sobering for me when I went to go visit him in the hospital, and he was kind of feeling doomed, and I was giving him the encouragement, like, no, you're 80, you could still gain muscle, it's fine. He said to me, man, I wish I did things differently when I was younger. I would have, if I knew that this is where I would end up, I would have done it differently. And if I could go back, I would have taken better care of my body, and I would have eaten differently, and I would have exercised more. And he was just kind of kicking himself. And it was like this really raw moment of like, it just like, I don't know if it made me recognize like my mortality or like what about it, but it just like really hit me of like, man, I don't ever want to get to that age and be like, man, I wish I did it differently. Like, I think we try to live the life now that our future selves will thank us for, so that we don't look back in our 80s and say, wow, I wish I took care of myself.
Listen, if you're tired of the all or nothing cycles, the diet starts Monday, the I know what to do, I'm just not doing it feeling, we should probably talk. Our one-on-one online coaching isn't just about workouts and meal plans. It's about building something that actually fits your life. No cookie cutter templates, no guilt, just real coaching and real results. Plus, we've got a pretty big team, so we can even pair you with an expert who actually understands your lifestyle because they've gone through it too. If that sounds like what you've been missing, check out the link in the show notes to apply for coaching. Then we'll send you the link to book a free, no obligation consult call with our team. There are no hard closes. We won't even take your credit card over the phone. You'll get the details to sign up on your own time. And more good news, we are in fact qualified for HSA FSA reimbursement. One last thing, we even offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you have nothing to lose. What are you waiting for? Spots are limited, so apply today. All right, let's get back to the show. But that doesn't mean you can't mess up along the way. Like, you can learn from it and you can grow so much stronger. That's a big reason why I'm so grateful for my journey and having dealt with horrific health issues for over a decade, like miserable for over a decade. But I absolutely would not be doing the things that I'm doing now if that didn't happen. I'd still be drinking. Like, I might still be smoking weed. And it's not like you can't do those things in moderation and be okay, but I was not doing any of that in moderation. I was taking ridiculous amounts of unregulated supplements, and I was blessed to have that wake-up call at such a young age. Like, I stopped drinking when I was 21.
Yep.
So being able to have this metamorphosis into who I became and the things that we preach now, like, it's never too late to start. It's never too late to start over. Like, you can maybe making bad decisions, but you stop now and you start making better decisions. So don't ever feel like you're in a hole you can't dig yourself out of. The only thing that's limiting your ability to do so is your limiting beliefs and that just fixed mindset that I can't, because you can do incredible things. You just didn't know that.
Yeah. You are not hopeless. You are not helpless. So that's a good point. So let's chat a little bit more about 40s and 50s. I know I brought up menopause, but I also want to talk a little bit about perimenopause and menopause. So, estrogen is going to play a big role in muscle protein synthesis. And after menopause, we have this steep decline essentially in estrogen. And with that, we can lose a ton of bone mass. So very, very important to continue strength training through your 40s, 50s, perimenopause, menopause. Many women complain of, weight gain and metabolic slowdown, in perimenopause and menopause. And again, that is coming from this kind of lower estrogen shift that's happening. So when we have lower levels of estrogen, we have decreased muscle protein synthesis. We also do see a difference in fat distribution, so more visceral fat. So you may notice just like your body composition shifting, even if you are not necessarily changing much about your food intake. We also have, if we have a less muscle protein synthesis and we're not strength training, we also have increased insulin resistance, like less insulin sensitivity, which is also going to change the way that we kind of store body fat. And it's going to affect our metabolism as a whole and our metabolic health as a whole. So mental health, cognitive function, strength training, and aerobic exercise are both going to play a role in that as well, which we also tend to see decline with perimenopause and menopause. So I think for a lot of people, they've received this messaging around perimenopause and menopause, like you're doomed and weight gain is inevitable. And while yes, there are hormonal changes that can make fat gain easier and muscle loss easier and bone loss easier, strength training preserves all of that. So Josh, you talked about this on some recent episodes, like the least we can do is maintain, but we don't want to decline. So whatever we can do to stop the decline is great. So strength training is going to preserve that lean muscle, which is going to help with metabolic rate and metabolic health as a whole and insulin sensitivity. I think we're also seeing a lot of messaging right now around menopause and like, don't do the HIIT training and don't do strength training. Like, your cortisol levels during menopause are high and like, just do the gentle yoga. And like, first of all, I just get so mad when we tell anyone that they shouldn't be strength training. Everyone needs to be strength training. Resistance training is going to have a greater effect on body composition, than cardio alone, but pretty much more than anything we can do. And if we
Outside of
can
sleep, it might be the most beneficial thing you can do for your health, period.
sleep and resistance training, done. If I had to pick two things, it's not some supplement. It's not some fancy superfood. It's sleep and resistance training over and over and over and over again in every stage of life. Which also poses some challenges because like a lot of people struggle with sleep in menopause, and like that plays into their hunger, their cravings, their insulin sensitivity, their desire to go to the gym, and so on. So key focus areas in 40s, 50s, perimenopause, menopause, heavy lifting, resistance training 3 or 4 times a week, emphasizing those compound movements. You don't need to change the way you're lifting because you hit 40. You don't need to change the way you're lifting because you hit 50. We also see a little bit higher protein needs as we get older because we do have more of that age-related muscle loss that we are trying to combat. So higher protein needs to support muscle maintenance. With that, we're talking about like 1.2 to 1.6 kilograms of body weight, grams per kilogram, of body weight per day. And also focusing on some mobility and flexibility work can be helpful, especially as we age, to counteract some of that stiffness and some joint changes that we may be experiencing hormonally or just from disuse.
You mentioned insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity, metabolic health, and for some people that might go right over their heads. For some people that might not understand correlations. When you're starting to talk about a decline in your metabolic health, you're talking about increased risk factors for the deadly
diabetes,
cancer,
high cholesterol, cancer,
neurodegenerative disorders,
blood pressure,
all of the above.
Yep.
So it's not something that's, metabolic health, it's just this thing. No, it's actually everything.
Yeah.
All the things that we're worried about, the top killers, it starts with the decline in metabolic health.
Yep. Yeah. When we talk about metabolic health, we're not just talking about metabolism. I'm not just talking about your metabolic rate and how many calories you burn per day, because I think that's what a lot of people think of when they hear metabolic. They're like, oh, my metabolism. But your metabolism is not just what you eat and what you burn. When we talk about metabolic health, we're talking about metabolic flexibility. We're talking about your insulin resistance. We're talking about your body's ability to uptake nutrients, to store body fat or to lose body fat. And muscle preserves almost all of those things that we can see when it comes to metabolic decline or metabolic disease. Like diabetes is a metabolic disease. That is an insulin sensitivity issue. I'm speaking specifically about type 2 diabetes, not type 1. But type 2 diabetes is lifestyle related. That is related to physical activity and dietary intake and what we are consuming. And that we are consuming far more than our body can process in terms of insulin and insulin storage. And something that can help a ton with insulin sensitivity is gaining muscle. We have better insulin sensitivity when we have more muscle on our body. So when we talk about, diabetes or cholesterol levels or triglycerides or blood pressure, muscle helps all of those things. Muscle is protective for all of those things because you have cells and receptors at the muscle site that help to control for insulin and blood pressure regulation and glucose levels, glucose control, and so on. So yes, it's easy for us to talk about like, oh, metabolic health, and for people to assume that's metabolism, but it's so much more than that. It's the physical benefits when it comes to muscle health and exercise. We're talking about bone density. When we talk about increasing bone density, we're talking about reduced risk of osteoporosis. When we strength train, we're enhancing joint health, and that means we're reducing risk of arthritis. When we are maintaining or increasing muscle mass, we're talking about preventing sarcopenia, which is that age-related muscle loss. Improving insulin sensitivity and glucose regulation means we're preventing or reducing risk of diabetes. When we support heart health with exercise, that means we're lowering blood pressure, lowering cholesterol levels. Managing body weight in and of itself is going to be cardioprotective and metabolically protective. We're also going to see better like hormonal outcomes. And hormones is kind of vague, but like for this sake of the conversation, we could say like reproductive hormones or sex hormones. So regulating the menstrual cycle better when we exercise, reducing PMS more when we exercise, improving testosterone levels when we exercise, supporting fertility and pregnancy outcomes when we exercise. Yeah, like it's everything. And so for me, it's so interesting to have this conversation as someone who used to solely exercise for the sake of caloric burn. And now I'm like, now I'm all about the longevity and the disease prevention and lowering my risk of chronic disease like diabetes or heart disease or certain cancers, like you said, Josh, reducing that inflammation and that oxidative stress, enhancing immune function and increasing just overall resilience. So yeah, it's important. And if you're listening to this podcast, you obviously value exercise. And so we might be like preaching to the choir here because you're probably involved in exercise in some capacity if you're here listening to the Fitness League anyway. But maybe it's worth sending this to someone who is not exercising or is thinking about exercising or is always, thinking of exercise as that thing for caloric burn. Because when the why can change and you have a different why to drive you, to keep you there, to keep you disciplined, to keep you showing up even on your hardest days, I just think it helps keep you going. Because it's if your only reason for exercise is aesthetics, it's so easy to look in the mirror and be like, well, nothing's really changing. What's the point anyway? But when your why is, I don't want to be 84 in the hospital saying, wow, I wish I took better care of myself. Or, man, I wish I could run around with my kids, but every time I try, I get too out of breath. When your why changes, you have a different reason for showing up or multiple reasons for showing up. So
And that's what kind of makes the data stuff cool. Like if you can afford an Aura or a Whoop, anything along those lines, even your Apple Health, I'm sure they're doing some things with it now. Like just seeing some metrics change before the mirror does can be all the motivation in the world. Or just getting an at-home blood pressure tracker, little things like that. Track your resting heart rate if you have the watch and you're sleeping with it, and HRV, all the little things. So when I do this, these things improve. So making sure we use weight as a data point. We use body composition through progress pictures as a data point. But there is a vast amount of data now available to us that we can use to compare and contrast.
yeah. One other thing I'll mention is one of the things that's really intriguing to me about exercise and health is the neuroprotective piece of it. So lower risk of neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's and dementia. And I'm watching my grandmother go through that right now, who's 81 and she's got Alzheimer's, and it's really awful to see. I won't get too into that, but it's like, again, I see that and I'm like, God, I'm so glad I'm exercising. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but maybe it means it happens at a later age. Maybe it means it's a slower progression. Maybe it means I prevent it altogether, but we have to do what we can. Like you have to do what you can when you can. So, yeah. All right, let's keep it moving. Talked about perimenopause and menopause, 40s and 50s. So after that, we're just kind of more so in the later stages of aging. So I'm going to call that 60s and beyond. My dad might not like that if he hears that, but I would say 60 and up is the
Ouch. Ouch.
the I don't know, the line that I'm
60
drawing.
is the new 40.
So does that mean that 80 is the new 60?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay.
It should be.
So I got to say exercising and aging is 80 and beyond, not 60 and beyond.
We'll say beyond what we've talked about to this point. But I mean, it is funny though. Like that can be such a vast comparison. Like 60 could be the new 40.
Yeah, like 60
could also
totally
be
different.
60 could also be the new 80 for some people. Like if you are in the department of I haven't taken care of myself, or you're on that trajectory, it can certainly be 80.
Yep.
But it could be 40. Like it's up to you, the things you're doing now.
Yeah. There's that Train with Joan lady. I think Alessandra and I talked about her once, but do you know who that is on Instagram?
It sounds familiar.
In her 80s. She's got like millions of followers. She's in her 80s and she started lifting at like 75 and like completely transformed her physique. And she like is 80 and looks like such a badass, and she's kind of jacked, and she's in her like cute little workout outfits. And I just think of her all the time in like the aging conversation. So yeah, exercise and aging, the why might change a little bit. I mean, if you asked my dad, who's like 61, he'd still be like, no, I lift to be jacked.
That's because he is. He's in the 60s, the 40 or the 35 department.
Yeah, he's in the jacked in 60s department. And granted, he does of course do it for his health too. But you know, there's obviously a piece during aging of preserving independence and mobility, because what we know is that muscle loss is going to ultimately usually lead to falls and fractures, and resistance training is going to improve your strength, improve your balance, improve functional movement, and again is kind of that insurance policy. Regular exercise, this was from a 2011 study, regular exercise reduces Alzheimer's risk by up to 50%. You cut your chances in half when you are exercising regularly. And I bet that number could even possibly go up depending on how long you've been exercising, what diet looks like, and so on. There is some new research coming out, side tangent, on Alzheimer's being considered type 3 diabetes. That is like diabetes of the brain, basically. That it's very related to, if we think about type 2 diabetes being very diet and lack of exercise related, diabetes of the brain essentially is what they're saying about Alzheimer's. And again, lifestyle related, sugar intake, carbohydrate intake, processed food intake, and lack of exercise. So I think that's very, very interesting. And with aging, quality of life, man, quality of life and longevity. Active seniors live longer. End of story. They live longer, healthier lives, and they maintain a higher degree of independence. Who does not want that? So yeah, older adults, you do not need to avoid lifting weights. Strength training is one of the most effective, if not the most effective, ways to prevent frailty and falls. And yes, people even in their 80s plus can increase muscle mass with resistance training. So it is never too late. You can still gain strength, improve your balance, improve your brain health through training. Yeah. Yep. So key focus areas: strength training 2 to 3 times per week, whether that is body weight, whether that is bands, whether that is standing on one leg, whether that is practicing sitting and standing out of a chair, whether you are the 93-year-old man at my gym doing squats and sitting on machines and, what is he doing? Overhead pressing like on a machine. A shoulder press on a machine. Whether it's balance and stability work or proprioception drills to, reduce your fall risk, movement matters. Movement matters. And if you want to keep it low impact, you could swim. That would be great for you. You could bike. That's still low impact. Final takeaways. Strength training, crucial at every stage of life. Cardio, crucial at every stage of life. Small, consistent actions lead to long-term success. And have a good why. Have a good why to keep you going. That would be my other takeaway.
I'll integrate the rest of the stuff real quick. I know we've talked about it a tiny bit, not recently, but blue zones have been hot for a little bit. They're a bit flashy. If you look at the components of like what's going on there, it's not the atmosphere that they're breathing in on a daily basis. Typically, might help a little bit depending if you're living in a downtown versus like somewhere in the mountains. But they're active, they're eating well. Like you said, whether they're swimming or they're walking or they're working out, they're gathering socially. Like these things happen more so in these specific areas. But I would go as far as to say, and no data behind it, but just a little bit of common sense, it's the things that are happening in those communities versus specifically the geographical location of those communities. So we can take what we've learned from there and we can apply them. And again, to throw out the L5 method, it's incorporating those specific pillars of health: training, nutrition, mindset, movement, and habit. Movement is not the same as training, so we always like to clarify that. You can go to the gym 6 days a week and live a sedentary lifestyle. We see it all the time. Clients will come to us and they'll go from that workout first thing before work to their desk. They'll come home, they'll eat dinner, they'll watch Netflix, they'll go to bed, and they'll start over. and they'll come in between 4 and 5,000, 5,500 steps per day. And that's a sedentary lifestyle. You want to hit that 7,000 step threshold. So move your body, take care of your mental health, lift something, go pick up a rock, carry it up a hill, whatever you got to do to get creative. Have dinner with the kids, embrace community. That's something we often overlook. But it's the basic things that as we get older, we tend to do less and less and less of. So again, through awareness, we create change. We're becoming aware that this does not have to be the case. You do not have to just let your body break down over time, let your mind break down over time, accept these terrible diseases are part of the norm. We can be proactive, starting now, starting later. It's never too late to start. Obviously, the earlier the better, but don't ever feel like you're too far behind the 8 ball to start playing the game. You can always catch back up.
Amen.
Where can they find you?
At Joelle Samantha.
I'm at Josh Skutnik, and everything else is linked in the show notes.